Welcome to the What's Your Ceiling podcast. We're your hosts, Monte, Wyatt, and Paul Scieszinski. Wherever you are in life, there is a higher ceiling. This podcast is how you become aware of it and how to take action to push through it. It's time to discover your ceiling.
All right. Well, welcome to What's Your Ceiling. And we always like to start with a great topic to get us thinking and challenging ourselves and where we're at and how we interact with others so we can break through that next ceiling. And the topic that I want us to talk about for a few minutes, Paul, is no judgment and perspective. I really think that the world has a challenge with judging others today. And I guess when you hear the word no judgment, what first comes to mind to you?
Well, I think judgment comes from the environment that you've lived in and how you've grown up. Our perspective, the way we grew up. If you grew up in a two-family, you had a perspective from a two-parent family. If you grew up with a single parent, you probably had a single parent, type of environment that affected the judgments that you make. And I think everybody, and depending on their situation, knowing what their judgment came from was probably an environment they grew up in.
Yeah.
I think that's the basis. And I think as we get older, we change. And you hopefully your ceiling, you're raising that ceiling to become more informed, so you become a better person, and whether it be your health, family, or your business.
I think something that's very critical today is everybody has a story. Everybody has challenges. And most of the world outside of us don't know what our challenges are because we don't want to share our challenges. That's human nature. We don't want to be known for a failure or known for that we had struggles. But that's what causes some judgment is people don't understand where we're at.
What a great way to put that, Monte, because what's your thoughts are who you are.
Yeah.
And that is where your judgment comes from.
Well, we judge ourselves a lot too.
We do. And I think a lot of people are more harder on themselves judging than they are on other people. Because at the end of the day, do you really think people, other than maybe an interaction with them, they really care about you? I mean, let's be honest.
It's all about themselves. Everybody thinks about themselves.
Human beings about themselves.
Yeah.
Now, we get, I think, as people get higher in their ceiling in life, I do think their judgment becomes better. I think that they do care about what people obviously think of themselves, because everybody wants to be liked. Let's be honest. Everybody wants to be liked. But it doesn't always work that way, because if you do have a foundation that you want to live on and be the person that you want to be, sometimes you got to step up and defend yourself. Mm-hmm. And which I think is going to be a great show today. I think we have a perfect individual that kind of knows where she's at in her ceiling, and she's raising her. So I think it's great.
Yeah, we're going to continue to talk about perspective and no judgment. But I want to introduce our guest today, because I am so excited to have this conversation. I've known Amanda Brink Hull for probably 18 or 19 years. Back in when I early started in my career in business coaching, just networking in the community. And I've always known Amanda as a high achiever, as someone who's very driven, has high influence around others and herself, but she's very focused on health and success. And so she's got some great stories I can't wait to talk about. So I want to welcome Amanda Brink Hull to the show.
Thank you so much. Yes. And what kind words? I mean, seriously, thank you so much, Monte. Super appreciate that.
Absolutely. Known you a long time, and we saw each other, just a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
And it had been the first time we'd seen each other in quite a while. So we got to catch up, and you started telling me some stories. And I said, you are a perfect guest for our show, because I want to hear how you've helped your family and yourself get through a number of things, especially in the last couple of years of everybody's life. But before we go down that path, we just talked about our view of what no judgment and perspective is. Any comments that you'd like to make on what that means to you when you hear judgment?
Yeah, and I think first, perspective is everything. I talk about perspective a lot with my children, with employees, coworkers, friends, and family, because we don't have perspective into everybody's life. We only probably know 10, 15% of what we think that person is all about, there's a whole lot of detail behind every human being that we're completely unaware of. And so whether it's politics, whether it's religion, whether it's how you raise your kids, you don't know what that individual has been through. And so you really kind of have to reel it back and think about the possibilities of why that person operates the way they do. And judgment comes from that. It's hard for us to take our own perspective and apply it to everybody else.
Yeah.
And I think in a world where social media is so insane, and I love it, but I hate it at the same time, because there's a lot that happens in social media. I call it virtual signaling. People want everybody to think that they are just doing great, their kids are rock stars, and that the world is good. But no one ever posts the hardships. No one ever posts the sob stories unless they're seeking attention. And so we have to realize that.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And so, I'm really glad, again, you joined us, because there's some things going on in the world that I think are challenging for all of us. But before we go down that path, you had a career of about 20 years or so in media. And so maybe if you would just tell us a little bit about your career and how you've progressed, because you are no longer in media, but you're in health.
Yeah. So, I had been in media for 20 years. I think when you and I met, Monte, I was a salesperson at WHO, which was the NBC affiliate here in Des Moines, Iowa. I then was hired into management at KCCI, which is the CBS affiliate here in Des Moines, Iowa. And so up until about a year ago, I was with KCCI, which was for 14 years in management, aiming to run that station at some point. And the company really had my back and put me through a lot of training, and I was climbing the corporate ladder to make that happen, and doing all of the right things. And obviously, the pandemic hit, things changed, policy took place, and all I can say is I have chosen, because I've always lived a very healthy and organic lifestyle for various reasons, which we might get into, I think, later in this podcast, but I'm not vaccinated. That is my choice. Whether that's a religious reason, whether that is a medical reason, is really not anybody's business but my own, but that's my choice. And so because of that choice, I needed to change careers. So now I'm on a completely different path. 2 years ago, I never thought I would be taking a completely different turn. But here I am today, a year later after leaving the industry, and there's definitely additional perspective in my life that has taken shape. There's good, bad, and ugly with all of it, but it's all been a huge learning lesson for sure.
Awesome. You skipped. We're going to go deep into something right there, because I think, again, our show is What's Your Ceiling, and breaking through ceilings. How do we push through some things? It wasn't just that you left that industry. It was a lot of what you just shared about your choice that, and maybe it starts before that. You've been into health for a number of years, and long before you left the media industry. So maybe tell us how you got deeper into a healthier lifestyle. And I think from your story that you were telling earlier, it was about 18, 19 years ago.
Yeah. So, I've always been, into health, played sports in high school, and went through my college years, which might have not been super healthy, and my early 20s. But, met my husband and got pregnant, have a daughter who's 20 years old now. She's awesome. She's thriving and doing great. But about when she was 2 years old, I thought I was having an appendicitis attack. And what turned out to not be an appendicitis attack was actually a really large tumor that consumed my right ovary. And so the doctors wanted me to go in right away, wanted to get it out, wanted to biopsy it, make sure that it wasn't cancerous or life-threatening. And at that moment, I just remember sitting in the doctor's office, and I'm pretty self-sufficient, so I really didn't have my husband involved up until that diagnosis, when I called him in a panic. But I was freaking out. I mean, I had a 2-year-old who I just absolutely adored and loved, and I was a new mother. And I swore to God that day, I said, I will change every unhealthy habit that I have ever had if you just let this be okay. And a week later, they took the tumor out, which was the size of a grapefruit, kind of like by cesarean. So I had to go through, anesthesia and a whole surgery. But, the other thing that came from that is, the doctor said, we don't know, you're going to have one ovary. It's not cancerous, thank God, which was great news, but it's going to be a while before your cycle comes back. Pregnancy might be, if you we're thinking about having a second child, that might be an issue. We're just going to have to kind of play that out. Never did get my cycle, kind of waited, and lo and behold, I was pregnant with our son Cameron, who is 16 now. But because I went through such a big surgery, the doctor said no intercourse, just like a C-section, just like after having a child, for 6 weeks. And I'm like, we didn't. I don't know how this happened. But he was apparently a floater. I mean, he was a floater when they did the surgery. It had happened, just had not embedded himself in the uterine lining as pregnancy goes. But then the doctors were extremely concerned that he came from that right ovary, which they removed. And the cyst from where the egg comes from feeds hormones into a baby to help it grow and, make it a successful pregnancy. So the fetus needs those hormones from the ovary where that egg came from. And so we went through a series of tests to make sure that the baby was going to be okay, that the cyst was, in fact, on my left ovary, which I still have. And we were just scared to death. And so there was a lot of scary things that happened in a very short period of time, from the cancer scare to a surgery to not knowing if I was ever going to be pregnant again, to finding out I was pregnant, to then thinking, oh my gosh, if I have this child, is it going to be deformed? Is it going to make it through the entire process because of everything that I'd been through, the anesthesia? I mean, everything. And he's great. He's awesome.
How did you stay positive through all that?
Yes.
It's really tough. I think I've always been the glass is half full kind of a person. And I kind of have been criticized sometimes for maybe putting too much hope into things. Mm-hmm. I just want to believe the best will come from everything, and I just so desperately want to believe that in almost every situation. Although I try to be a realist about things, I think it is really expecting the worst. I mean, mentally expecting the worst and knowing if that news happens, if the worst happens, you're prepared for that. It's not going to be pleasant, and you're going to have to figure out steps to deal with it, but really hoping for the best. I mean, in every situation, up until, as we just talked about, my career that ended a year ago, I had hope until the moment that I found out it was not going to work out for me. I had hope that it was going to resolve itself. And that hope never went away. Unfortunately, in that case, it didn't work out. But with my health, with the cancer scare, with my son, it worked out, and I just think that it's a positive mindset, and that contributes a lot to people's lives.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think that a lot of times when you're in that situation, you probably had some support there, I would guess, because that's a tough situation with physical, your business side, you had health, family, and business going all at one time. That's tough. And and can you tell us a little bit about what type of support you had at that time?
It changes, as you kind of mentioned at the beginning of this podcast today. It does change as you grow up, right? So I'm now 20 years older, and I've learned a lot. I've always had that positive mindset, but I've always had I don't want the woe is me. I don't need people feeling sorry for me. I very rarely ask for help, and that can be a detriment. It can definitely be a detriment. I like to do things on my own and figure things out. I don't like to, people think that I'm maybe off-putting, but I'm trying to be sensitive to them because I don't want to burden people with my problems. And so I just really try not to, and I try to deal with them on my own. But the support has changed through the years. Your circles change. You know, when you have kids and you're in sports, those families are your support circles. When you have a career in a business, those employees, those coworkers, those peers are your support system. That all changes, you know, over the last 2 decades. So 20 years ago, family and friends were a great support system through that. Not many people know that medical story that I just shared because, again, I keep it to myself and I don't want to burden people, don't want to make them feel sorry for me or, you know, anything like that. But today, you know, with what recently has transpired in the last year, I've found that my circle has shrunk. Because people can be selfish, and I think you alluded to that also at the podcast, you know, especially when you're in the minority. This last year, I mean, confessing to people, which I just did a couple months ago that on my social media page by telling people that I'm not vaccinated. You know, there's probably people in the school system that that were like, what? No way. You know, she's all about health. How could she not have be vaccinated? Well, I think of it differently. My perspective is very different for various reasons. And so you lose friendships, unfortunately. And that's probably been the toughest thing in the last year is, you know, the people that I've really championed for because I was in management. You know, I championed for a lot of people. I did a lot of good things for a lot of people who never reached out to me to wonder what happened, where I went, why I left. And that really stings. I mean, so you find out that your circles are much smaller than what you think that they are. There's a lot of people that won't back you when it comes to, you know, when it comes to the day. There's a lot of people that don't want to touch it.
Yeah. Well, I believe that it's a choice in the vaccination. And Monte and I this is for another episode, but I did get vaccinated. And I wish I never had, but I'm not going to go into that right now. But the vaccination, you know, has really been a difficult even for people that have taken it and wish they had not. And then you have the people that had stood up and did not take the vaccination. And, you know, you hear so many different stories. But I think it goes back to that tipping point of, 73% of the people get it. And unfortunately, some people, I believe it's a bad disease, and it was something that we had to deal with. But I think until you get to that point of 73% or whatever it is, the immunity of the population, we're going to do that no matter what. Yeah. So we don't want to get into debate. I know on vaccine.
Well, Amanda, I really liked what you said. It is about respecting other people's perspective. And I think that's where the world is really hurting us today is if you don't like my way of doing it, then I can't be friends with you anymore. Right. And there's no respect in that.
No. There's absolutely no respect in that, and especially when people don't mean harm, right? So my choice not to be vaccinated is not to purposely infect people with a virus. That is not my intent. In order for you to understand my intent and the importance to me, you have to ask some pretty personal questions because it is a medical situation. And I do know people that have had that also have your position that wish they hadn't, and this was before even a year ago. I mean, I personally know people who have suffered from that choice, and it's gone a completely different direction for them. Now, there's a lot of people that made the choice, and they're great, and they continue to get boosted, and that's their choice, and that's amazing. But it's like so many other things that have happened in the last few years. You know, you've got Black Lives Matter. You've got Roe versus Wade being overturned. We are so divided. And until we have the perspective of that person or that other party, we will never know. We will never know what their lives and what they've been through.
Well, I think Absolutely. I agree with you, Amanda. I think also when that vaccine came out, you took that vaccine because you didn't want to spread it.
Right.
But when we found out the vaccine's only good for 60 days and it doesn't matter, you're going to spread it no matter what.
Correct.
So when you get the correct information, I think each and every individual has the right to make their own decision. And in that respect, your health is more important than probably anything, and then it's your family and your business. So I think that people should be able to make their own decision, and you shouldn't be judged on the decisions you make. Unfortunately, society's not that way.
And to that point, I want to come back to 12 months ago, and I know it's not a fun conversation, but what really happened there? And I want to know how you got through that mentally, and because you had 20 years of experience in that industry, 14 years of management, and then all of a sudden it just wasn't right anymore.
So, there's a price tag with everything, which I think is a reason why a lot of mandates, whether they were from the government or your company or the military, I mean, there's a lot of, or your health system that you worked for, there's a lot of nurses and doctors who also had to make that decision. And it's a paycheck, right? It's your livelihood. And what is that worth to you? Okay. So when I looked at that and realized that there was, there could potentially be a financial loss, but what was that worth to me? And because I've been so into fitness and health my entire life and went through some hiccups over the last 20 years, I thought to myself, if I were to just do it, okay? What if I'm 1 in the 1 million? What if I'm 1 in the 100,000 or 1 in 800 now, or whatever it might be? If I have a neurological issue and I can't play football with my kid in the front yard, which I love to do, you might as well just kill me now, okay? My life is not going to be worth living if I can't take my dog for a walk every day, if I, have a neurological disorder that prevents me from doing all of the things that I love and have preached about loving, and I really fully believe that everybody should be doing the same things. My life is not going to be worth living. And once you do it, you can't reverse it.
Right. Okay.
So you really have to think carefully about it. And there's so many words that are used in media, in advertisements that make people believe this is a solution. You have diet solutions that it's a magic pill. You're going to lose 10 pounds in 30 days. It's not sustainable. You better read the disclaimer because not everything is what it's cracked up to be. In most cases, it is not.
Absolutely.
And so it is so imperative that people do their own research and evaluate statistically. It's not an opinion-based decision. Decisions can have opinion and heart in them, but there's facts everywhere. And you need to expose yourself to the facts and really understand the implications of doing it or not doing it, and then making an educated decision, for you, the individual. Now, when it comes to, health, my whole thing is with, you kind of talked about it, Paul. We're doing the wrong thing as a country and a world and a society. Because when we have obese rates that are skyrocketing and they're not getting any better, we have people suffering from, high blood pressure, type 2 diabetes, strokes, heart attacks, and people dying at 40, 50 years old. There's a problem. And it's not vaccines, it's not medicine. It's how we are living our lives. We are not eating the right foods. We are eating too much of the wrong foods. And we're not exercising. But because there's no money in good health, it's not being promoted.
Yeah, and I think, getting back to the media, I think you've got CNN, Fox, a lot of people, which divide us also, is they'll listen to the news and get a uninformed information. Now, to credit to CNN and Fox and all the different, they just have a reporter that's going out there listening to anybody that has a good, sound that they can get some news to get eyes on their TV. I do not watch. I watch a little local news. I read. I think the Wall Street Journal, in my opinion, is probably the best read as far as getting as neutral as you can. So I would recommend the Wall Street Journal to anybody. But I think people need to step back. I mean, there's so much great information out there today if you know where to get it. I think there's more information today than ever. So you may become more informed than you ever have. So I agree. I think that people get misinformed, and then they lean on the government for the information, and they're not always right.
So you spent the last 18 years being healthy. You eliminated the wrong things. You focused on the right things. You drink lots of water. You exercise every day. I love your videos online of you out lifting weights or doing something.
Yeah.
But the television station saw it differently.
I don't know as if they saw it differently. I think that there was just a policy put in place, and I didn't follow that policy. And again, that was my choice. And so here is where I'm at today.
When we spoke a couple weeks back, I loved how you said it. You said it. They didn't think that I was as healthy for the organization any longer. They didn't think, because you were not willing to take the vaccination.
I think at that time, if it stops the spread, if it stops the virus from happening, that was the biggest concern. Now it's different today, a year later. So facts have changed, but a liability, a risk, maybe that's the way it was thought of.
So how did you again mentally push through that? Because you were there a long time. You had relationships. You talked about positive thinking, but this is much deeper than just positive thinking.
So it is having that hope. It's having. I will tell you that my husband was great in the fact that he's always supported me. He's never thought that I would, or he's never been worried that I would surpass him career or financial wise. He's always allowed me to further my education, further my career, and has always supported me. And I think that that is a big deal because I know that there's a lot of marriages that there can be a jealousy, especially when the female is a successful career person and maybe even the breadwinner of their household. But my husband was like, you know what? This is not how you need to be, treated. You need to take several months. I'm like, I'm going to find another job. I'm going to do something. I'm going to conquer the world. And he's like, no, you need to breathe. You need to stop. You need to take 3 or 4 months. You need to digest what is happening, how you're going to tackle it, and what you want to do with your life moving forward. And he gave me that opportunity and told me that it was okay. He made me feel that it was okay to slow down, that I don't have to be putting in 50, 60 hours a week, that he had my back and that we would get through it and it would be fine. And maybe it was time, for a philosophical reboot in what I was doing, for a living. So, that was huge. I don't think if I didn't have that support, I wouldn't have taken a breath, a lot of them, and taken a step back to kind of just rethink things and being extremely aware and looking at all the different perspectives out there and all of the different avenues that I could potentially take. And there's a lot of options, so there's that. But the other piece was that I am healthy, that I eat right, and that I work out. My workouts, and I've been doing CrossFit for over 10 years now. It's very hard. It's very difficult. People get intimidated by that, but it's something that I've always loved because there's a lot of aggression that gets taken out in those workouts. And I've found that I've needed that, and it is therapy for me. And so I continued through the pandemic, through this last year, faithfully, daily, doing those workouts. I think if I would have just sat on the couch and had been eating ice cream and put 20 pounds on, I don't think I would have pulled through this last year if I did not already have that healthy mindset and stuck with it.
This is a perfect example of the awareness factor, and going through your ceiling. Your husband, what a cheerleader. He's a pretty special guy, as you well know. But to have that as a team, and like you said before, a lot of marriages don't have that. Mm-hmm. But to have that, and your husband's awareness is off the hook, because you're a leader, you like control, and you get things done, and your husband saw that. And you needed a breather for a few months, because he knew no matter where you went, and once you put the eye of the tiger into it, you're going to achieve whatever you want.
Right.
And her husband caught that.
Yeah.
And to see that little tell like that is really cool.
Yeah.
And it was without really judgment.
Cool.
Yeah.
And it was with understanding your perspective.
Correct. Absolutely.
And you were open-minded and had the respect for your husband to sit back and listen to him.
Yeah.
That's both awareness on both sides there.
Absolutely.
Because
that's
there's
huge.
a little awareness that if you don't have at that time, and that gets back to having either too big of an ego or your awareness is so low, you end up, and we'll get back to this again, you end up you're going through life as an average person. And if you want to tuck above that, those little awareness that your husband has as a cheerleader, he knew who you were. Mm-hmm. You kind of lost a little bit a little bit of control, that leadership, and he brought you back into that lane again. Mm-hmm. And you got back in your lane, and you're coming back again. Mm-hmm. That's really cool, because that's really what we're really about. Because Monte and I want to become better, and by listening to you, make us better. Mm-hmm. Because it's about the people around you, around us, and that's cool.
And and I think that I've seen a lot of, well, in my opinion, bad marriages, friends that go through divorce, situations. But it's the same thing in friend circles too, or even family members. There are people in our lives who are cancerous, and if they're not helping you and lifting you up every day, if they're the dark cloud that's coming in the room and keeping you down, you really have to reevaluate those relationships, whether it's a marriage, a relative, or, a close friend for many years, because a lot of times those people can be anchors. So my philosophy is get rid of the anchors.
Yes. The drainers. I call them drainers. The drainers.
Energy suckers.
Yeah,
Energy suckers.
Everything out of you.
Absolutely.
Yep.
And it gets back to, I think any human being, if they have their mindset and their awareness at a level, I think they can reach any ceiling they want to achieve.
Absolutely.
And it gets back to, weeding that, putting that team around you that is going to be there, that's real. Mm-hmm. And, and it's a little bit, and I will have to say this, it's just a little bit tougher for a woman. And I think it's better today, though. I think it's women can become a more equal as men. But as you well know, a lady that's a leader like you and playing in a man's league, you probably intimidated men. At times you didn't realize it, but which is really, in a sense, an asset to have, because sometimes you just got to get up and knock those pins down.
Well, and so that's a good point. And that is also being aware of your surroundings, right? Mm-hmm. So that doesn't bother me. You try to kind of soften the blow a little bit, especially since I have been doing CrossFit for 10 years, I probably have better biceps than most men I know. I mean, I'm just saying, in all honesty. And that's okay. And I'm okay with that. But you have to make people around you also feel comfortable with who you are. If it's a strong personality, but I'm not apologetic. I'm not going to, because when I started my career in management, it was mostly men who were managers in media. Mm-hmm. And I was 32 years old, got a management gig in a big media company, which, gosh dang it, that was a huge accomplishment. And I fought for it. I mean, I was getting my master's degree because I wanted an edge over every other candidate out there for that particular position. And I thought that would definitely help. But I worked for it. Mm-hmm. And, you're a 32-year-old woman coming into an established department and having to manage 40 and 50-year-old men. Mm-hmm. And you have to understand how to approach them, because you can either lead them You can motivate them, or they won't like you from the very get-go.
Yeah, you can't push them.
You can't push
How
them.
long did it take you to build trust with them?
I don't know. That's a really good question. I'd love to hear their feedback actually on that. There was a few that were part of the team that I had worked with at WHO, and so they had my back from the very get-go because they knew me as a person. There was a few that maybe didn't know me so well. I'd like to say probably within a couple months.
Yeah.
But I think getting feedback from people and sitting down and talking to people about, what they like, what they don't like, where they're headed, you have to get buy-in with folks, and that's with anything.
I absolutely agree. I think you got to get some creed with anybody, and that comes with, no matter if you're the janitor or the president of the company, you show respect to everybody.
Absolutely.
And you pick the people up and you, especially the people that you can see got potential.
Yeah.
And if you step around there and you pick that person up and bring them along with you, and people respect that, because the rest of them will weed themselves out.
Yeah.
I think, like the bell curve we talk about, the lower people will weed themselves out.
They do.
And they do.
They do.
And, but, everybody gets back to the judgment. And sometimes people get into judging people without having enough awareness of because of their environment where they come from.
Amanda, you've done a great job. We've talked about your career. You've talked about your health. Your physical health, we've spent a lot of time on. I want to change it to mental health. Today, mental health is a major challenge. I think, whether it's through the pandemic, it's always been a challenge out there for mental health in certain industries. But I'd love for you to share your experience over the last couple of years through the pandemic and just through life in general of what your family has gone through in friendships and how you worked through that. So could you tell our audience that story?
So, I can really see, especially this last year, I can really see, and again, I don't have full perspective, so I can't say 100%. But I can see how people can become clinically depressed. I can see why people commit suicide, okay? There's always pieces throughout life that kind of, nobody wants to talk about it, but it's there in the back of your mind, right? Like, this is just a really hard time. I don't know. You have dark thoughts that never really surface. We're human. We all do. But, there was a woman in our community with children who committed suicide at the start of the pandemic, very successful woman. And it just broke my heart because she, had kids, my kids' age. And I just didn't understand how a mother could do that. Obviously not knowing her perspective. She was a business owner. There was probably, some financial hardships because things shut down during the pandemic. Who knows what her story was, but that was heartbreaking to me. And I don't know the story and I don't know the full story, but obviously there was something there to take her down that path. Each one of our children has had someone in their circles, though not super close, but a friend of our daughters committed suicide in the last year and a half. A baseball player, a teammate of our son's baseball tournament league, who we didn't know all that well, but he committed suicide at the age of 16 in this last year. And, he was with his parents that day. He went home, he went to school that morning, lifted weights with his friends, came home at lunch to walk with his mom, and then that afternoon they couldn't find him. So you don't know what goes on behind closed doors. You don't know what happens at school, and especially with social media. And I think these kids, I worry to death for my children because they are, I do Facebook because I'm old and Gen X, that's the thing for us. And that can be bad too, because you see things, you see things that you're left out of as a parent. That your kids are left out of, their friends are doing things and they're not in that, and you wonder how that affects them. And I can't even imagine how Snapchat, TikTok, I'm not involved in all of those, but I've been a part of, and my children who are very good at coming to us with questions, concerns, not everything. I'm sure that there's a lot that they hide from us, but people pick on people. Mm-hmm. People bully people. People make other people feel like crap, whether it's intended or not. And especially when you're young, there's a lot of intention there to make other people. I see it in sports teams. I see it with peers. I see the language that they use, and it is not necessary. And when you are 16 or 14 or 12, I mean, we were dealing with this when my daughter was just getting a cell phone at 12 or 13, not invited to birthday parties, and everybody Snapchatting and saying, we're here, you're not. And she's in her room at midnight. Phones go up at our house at 8:30. There is no reason anybody needs to be communicating to anybody during the middle of the night. Cell phones are up, they are out of reach, because there is no good that can happen at 1 a.m. from a Snapchat or a TikTok message. It can wait till the next day.
Tell us about those conversations with your children to help them when they had people in their circles do that, and how did you help them work through the process?
It's hard. I hope that I'm helping. I hope that we are helping. Maybe it's easier because I am their mother, and I've always been an independent thinker, and I really don't care what other people think of me. I can be weird. I know that I'm weird. I know that I have man arms. I know that I was one of the very few who stood their ground by not being vaccinated when a lot of people were, and that was scary. I'm confident in that. I'm okay with it. If you don't want to be my friend because of any decision I've ever made, that's fine. You want to talk behind my back? That's fine. I'm pretty tough-skinned and I can handle it. But I'm also 47 years old, and I've been through a lot. I've learned a lot, and I'm not here to make everybody happy. It's hard for a 14 or 16-year-old to understand that, because they do want to make everybody happy. It's their peer world. It's their school. They want to be accepted by everyone. And it's okay to not be. It's okay to not be part of that friend group because they don't have the same principles that we do at our house. That's okay, And I think if you can coach kids to be okay with who they are, and try to mold them and shape them into wonderful human beings that work hard and are kind to others regardless, hopefully that
How did they respond to that conversation?
They think I'm weird and silly sometimes, and sometimes they don't think, I think it's pretty typical for kids, but you don't understand. You don't understand, Mom. You don't understand. I got it, Mom. Well, our 20-year-old, who, like I said, she's finishing up her associate's degree, and she's just got her first full-time job. But she's told me now a couple times, you were right. You were right about the boyfriends. You were right about not spending so much money at Starbucks and Casey's for donuts in the morning, and instead putting that money away to pay for school because she's going to be graduating with an associate's debt-free. I was right. 14 and 16, kids think their parents are crazy.
You brought something up, you're pretty tough and you can handle a lot. And I think, but when you see your child hurt, it changes the game a little bit.
Yeah.
That
for
changes,
sure. And I had this conversation with my daughter just yesterday. In fact, she stopped over at the house to have a quick conversation. And I told her, I said, she was dealing with a situation in her life, a relationship in her life where she might have to cut ties, but she didn't want to hurt feelings. Mm-hmm. And I said, Maslin, I've never wanted to hurt your feelings or your brother's feelings. But with tough love, that sometimes has to happen to benefit not only you, but that other person. People think, and especially when you manage a group of employees like I did for many years, or have children, they're disciplined. Not every conversation, it's not rainbows and unicorns. I'm tough, but I'm kind. Toughness is kindness.
It is.
Especially
Absolutely.
If it is truth. If it is truth, it is kind. Because you're trying to set people up for success, not failure. If you continue to shield them and baby them and coddle them, it's only going to hurt worse a year later.
Yes,
So
absolutely.
you have to be truthful. You have to recognize the facts, not just the warm, fuzzy words. You have to recognize the facts, the different scenarios, the different perspectives. And sometimes you have to ignore other people's judgment if you're doing the right thing.
Absolutely.
That's a whole new ceiling right there for so many people.
It is.
Because we want to be liked. We want to have friends. But friendships, because of social media and other things, have gotten weaker, I think, because
I agree.
we're wanting to look a certain image.
Yeah.
I'm included. We want to have that certain image out there, but unless we become a little more humble and start to share who we really are, we're not going to get that tough love. And that's what's needed today is toughness and kindness. I love how you said that.
And Monte's in the business of working with businesses. And for him to be, and he coaches clients all over the United States, and for him to be at a level that he's at, he's had to say stuff to clients. And that's also when me and him get feedback, we're truthful in what we say. We don't care about each other's feelings because it's not personal. It's about getting better.
Right.
And that gets back to the awareness. And first of all, I think it's tougher for a young lady to grow up than it does for a young male. Not all cases, but majority. Yeah. Because my daughter, wonderful, and she was an athlete. She had everything, but she always had the girl thing issues.
I can tell you.
And I never, still getting back and not getting invited to something, or I grew up, I never really, of course I grew up, I was in my own world, but until I had a daughter, and then I saw the other side of it, it did change me a little bit.
Yeah.
I think the tough love is the right thing, because I want to tell about my daughter. She is soon to be 20 years old. She's got a part-time job, and she works with, it's all part-time college students that are working here. Or they're all full-time college students, but they're working there part-time. She was working in a group with a bunch of 19-year-old boys. They were making a lot of female jokes that were very inappropriate in a professional setting. In any setting, they're inappropriate. And she was tough. She went and she said to management, "This is disrespectful of me." And they no longer work together. Yeah. And you have to have that toughness to stand up for yourself when things aren't right. Right. In challenging what your beliefs are. Yeah. And you have to have that gut, that strength, that bicep that you said in our mind to go battle that, because that's the mental health that's challenging today is we don't believe we can fight it. Right.
And I think too, it's self-recognition and self-realization. You know, being self-aware is it's huge for me. I'm probably more self-aware than others and more critical of myself than others. My standards for myself are extremely high. But you know, you need to know when it's crying wolf though too. And I think especially when it's kids. You know, we're in a very large school system, and there's kids that they cry wolf all the time. Whether it's racial slurs, whether it's, you know, teachers treating them unfairly. And I'm telling you, because there's lack of parental control in so many households these days, teachers don't have control.
And the kids want attention.
And the kids want attention. They're attention seeking. They're not eating properly, which causes the brain to do weird things when you're growing. So that's a whole nother topic. I've been on school lunches. Nobody seems to want to listen to me. But it affects their brains. And, you know, it's hard for teachers because they're going to get sued. They can't do anything like when I was in school, you know, I remember our principal wrestling a kid to the ground because he told the principal to F off. Yeah. That wasn't going to ever happen again. No. Kids today, they can do it. They can say that they're being discriminated against. They can say that they're not getting enough attention. They can say that they were wrong. The parents will back their child up when they are wrong, which makes it incredibly unfair to the kids who are trying to do the right thing. Ultimately, they're the ones. And so,
and unfair to the teachers.
It's a huge problem.
Yeah, teachers, it is a huge problem. These teachers, they need to make a raise. It's the teachers.
Absolutely. And so it's parents, hopefully, which we know is not going to happen across the board, but teaching your kids to be really self-aware and knowing when to raise, like in your daughter's situation, when to raise an issue like that versus if it's just attention seeking.
Correct.
Because, the world again is like the Me Too movement. I'm not, there's a reason for it, but there's also a lot of, I don't know. I don't know.
Right. Yeah, I don't know either.
I don't know.
But, something you brought up, I think fair. Talk about fair. Don't come to me about fair. There's nothing fair.
No.
And I hate to say it, but we're all born, and it's up to us to decide what we're going to achieve and what we're going to do,
and what we eat, and how we spend our time, and how we.
And your health, what you put in your body is what you're going to get back. There's so many things out there. When I hear a person say, "Well, that's not fair," Amanda's achieving. They don't realize the work and the mental things it took to get to that level, to be an athlete at that level, to run at that level, have the strength at that level, or be in business. It all comes down. There's nothing fair.
No.
So you got to get over the fairness. People that talk about, well, that's not fair, that's a tell to me.
It is, because, again, you don't see 80%, 85, 80% of what happens behind the scenes with people. People don't see, 80% of me. I'm pretty out there, but there's a lot that people don't know about me, and that I choose not to share. But that's the same with everybody. And to your point, we're all pretty much born, like the excuses. We have the ability to raise ourselves up, treat our bodies well, treat our minds well, continue to learn, continue to be disciplined. We all have those opportunities. It's whether or not you take those opportunities or not. And there's consequences with every decision. So, you choose not to go to school, there's a consequence to that. You choose to eat like crap, there's a consequence to that. But don't tell me, or don't rationalize it in your mind, well,
Absolutely.
I'm just big boned, or it runs in my family. No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. Pretty sure that we all have pretty much the same skeletal build. Big boned is not a thing. I was abused. There's a lot of people that are abused. There are a lot of people that are born without limbs, that are NFL players.
Right.
I mean, come on. You can overcome anything. It's what you recognize.
And we had a little episode. Monte brought this up on taking ownership.
Yes.
And we talk about, well, there's ownership in owning your house, but there's also ownership in your person. Mm-hmm. Take ownership in your actions, your decisions, and it changes. Because I'll admit, when I was younger, if I had an issue or I had a problem and I stepped back, or I had an issue with somebody, a lot of times it's because I didn't take ownership of my own actions.
Yeah.
And as I become more aware and matured, I realized if you can take ownership in every action you have, you just took your awareness from here to here.
Absolutely.
Yep.
And you just put yourself in the 20%, because it's the 80-20 rule. But if you can take that ownership and have that awareness, you're in the 20% automatic. Mm-hmm. And then obviously you want to get in the top 5 or 2%.
Well, and this is what I tell our kids too, because it's kind of like employees. Like I manage my children like I did my group of people. It's kind of very similar, but it's like whenever there's a problem, whenever you made a mistake on a report, you said something wrong to a client, you aren't putting enough effort into baseball, then you need to say, I'm sorry, I recognize that, right. You're right, I made a mistake, it won't happen again. I don't care if you made a mistake. I don't care if you didn't put the effort in, but realize it, own up to it, take ownership, and then try to fix it. If you don't want to fix it, then tell me you don't want to fix it. Right. And either you're not right for the job, or maybe we shouldn't continue with sports.
And maybe you shouldn't be in my world. It's right. Time for you to leave, because that's important. And I think we've seen it more than ever in politics. Mm-hmm. Oh. Whether you're President Biden or President Trump. Yep. I mean, nobody wants to take responsibility, and it's filtered out into our country. Mm-hmm. And I think it's important that people like us get together and talk about it. I mean, be honest with you, I probably have made more mistakes than you and Monte put together 10 times over. So I'm not condoning anybody. I'm just saying that, if we can take ownership and we can spread that word and having these conversations that we're having today, I think it's important. And this is where it starts.
Absolutely. Amanda, I really love your openness and your willingness to share with us, more of your life than maybe you've shared with others. And so we do appreciate that.
Yeah.
One of the last questions we always like to ask our guests is, what do you want to be known for? And I'd really love to hear, you've accomplished a lot. You focus on health, you focus on mental health. What do you want to be known for?
I don't know. I think, I like I've been called a warrior before. One of our state representatives called me a warrior, and I got a really great card from one of our state representatives, which I won't name, just before the election, saying that I was a warrior and just kind of helping understand the position over the last couple of years. And I really appreciated that term, a warrior. But I think also a pioneer, in that it's okay to be different. I say, there's lions, not sheep. I'm a lion. I don't want to be a sheep. In fact, I don't really want to follow the crowds. If it's, the name brand thing or doing what everybody else is doing, that's not me. I kind of want to be a pioneer. I want to do my own thing, and I want to fight for what's right, and not just follow people because that's what everybody else is doing. It's the in thing to do. But I think more importantly, it's kindness. And like I said, some people don't recognize my kindness as kindness because it can be harsh. But it comes from a place of kindness, because in order to help people, especially if they don't recognize where they're headed, or what they're doing is harmful to them or people around them, you have to be a little harsh. And so kindness is one of those things that I want to be recognized for. And in that, I really pride myself, with a career, with my relationships, with my kids, with, just everybody. I've never told a lie. Not even in the sales world. I don't even, really, I don't lie to people. I've never been caught in a lie. I'm a terrible liar, so I'd probably turn red and you'd know it right away if I were, but I'm very truthful. And I'm not gonna lie to protect anybody. And so I'm truthful, and I'm kind, and a pioneer, and a warrior.
I love it.
I might lie, by hiding ground turkey in chili or pasta sauce and not telling my family that it's not beef. And sometimes I can get by with that, but that's about as far as we go.
That's pretty cool.
I love it. I've learned so much from you today, and I really appreciate everything. Paul, what were a couple learnings that you've had from Amanda?
She's a perfect example of why we're doing this show. And she's brought together, we talked about kindness, joy, and ownership. And we've had that, we touched on the ownership on another podcast, a little bit of joy, but you've kind of brought all three of those together. And I really enjoyed this interview, and I appreciate you taking the time to come here and do this.
Yeah. A couple points that I captured that I think are powerful that I want our audience to remember. When you go through tough things, mentally expect the worst, prepare for the worst, but hope for the best.
Yeah.
We can't get stuck in I'm at the worst. We got to prepare for it. There's preparing for that, and then you have to hope for the best that you're after. Mm-hmm. So I love that. And drop the anchors. Drop the anchors. We all have people in our lives, or activities in our lives, or thoughts in our lives that are anchors, and those anchors are killing us every single day.
Yep.
And whether it's the food that we're eating can be anchors to us, the people that we hang around with. So I thought that was a fantastic one. And the last one I'll share is everything has a consequence. And I think that part of awareness, people don't think about what the consequences are. We're living in such a microwave world. We just want whatever it is right now, and we aren't willing to be aware of what that consequence could be, because I want this right now.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Right now doesn't happen. That's not real life.
That's
an advertisement.
Right now is an advertisement.
So it's all about sustainability and knowing what the long term is, because there's no, as mentioned with the food especially, or illnesses or ailments or education, there's no magic pill, there's no magic solution. Things don't happen overnight. It is momentum every single day to spiral you into the right direction. It's baby steps every day, whether it's weight loss, whether it's career move, whether it's education, it's steps every day. And momentum, it's inertia. It has to happen daily.
Now, I know who did you have push you? Did you have someone as your dad, your mom? When you grew up, you must have somebody that pushed you.
You
have
know,
that drive.
I will tell you, I'm not exactly sure where I got it from. And just to give you, not to like, this could be a whole nother podcast, but I have 3 younger sisters, so I'm the oldest of 4 girls. My dad was a man's man, a hunter. I think he really wished one of us would have been a boy. But he taught us all how to hunt, he took us all to DNR classes. Relatively poor. I mean, I remember getting government cheese as a kid, and being really worried as a kid what my friends would think if they knew that, because we were surrounded by rich farmers.
Right.
And my dad, was a blue collar worker, and we lived on a small acreage, and my mom stayed home with us up until until the youngest went off to school. But modest wage earners, and probably my health comes from my dad hunting and having a pretty large garden that was kind of a pain in the butt, around harvest and canning time. But we couldn't afford Doritos. We couldn't afford Lucky Charms. So I never got used to it, and always learned how to cook and be self-sufficient. And I remember back in those days, before cell phones and all of that, babysitting for my 3 younger sisters when I was probably 10 years old. Yeah. And so there's a lot of responsibility for me back in that time period. And being in a very small school district, you could be a part of everything. I mean, there was only 27 kids in my graduating class, so I played volleyball, I ran track, I was part of student council, I was in band, I was in choir, I did all of the things, which was awesome. But, I think it's that defiance. So it really kind of tipped me over. And this is another story. My guidance counselor in high school, I could mention his name. I don't even know if he's still alive. But he told me, because at the time I was dating, the star football player in high school, and I'm blonde, blue-eyed, cute little cheerleader track runner. He told me the only degree I was ever going to get was an MRS degree. Not okay.
That's motivation enough. That's right motivation.
There. And by God, that was the tipping point. So from that point on, if you told me that I couldn't do something, my goal was to prove you wrong.
Game on.
Every time you tell me that I can't do something, I will find a way to prove you wrong. So give me a challenge, and I promise I'll achieve it. But that's kind of probably a little bit, because it was that fire. I was pissed off. Yeah. And my parents taught us all really well how to be self-sufficient. And I was the first person in my family to go to college and graduate from college. And so I proved that damn guidance counselor wrong.
I love it. I love it. We're going to have you back on the show, because I love your stories.
There's always a story behind the story. Great story.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Amanda, thank you so much, Monte and Paul. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks, everyone, for joining us.